invited/coerced these folks to come down from San Francisco and talk to us about Vision Zero. Vision Zero has been a big initiative in San Francisco, just like LA, and they're just a little bit ahead of us, and I thought it'd be interesting to just get a little glimpse into where we're headed and, you know, talk about lessons learned, have questions, have a just nice discussion to see where our colleagues in San Francisco are with Vision Zero and what we can learn from that. So Hava Cronenberg is going to present. She is a planner and one of the smartest people in San Francisco. She's brought with her one of the other smartest people in San Francisco, Dr. Shadamiri, who I'm calling the Assistant City Traffic Engineer. I don't know if that's his official title, but he probably will be City Traffic Engineer very soon. And so James, I think, is here just to support and answer questions. He's done a lot of the technical pieces that support pedestrian safety. Hava is in charge of all of the Vision Zero pedestrian safety work in San Francisco, where they have a lot of political pressure to deliver things quickly, and they had a bond measure pass that we hope to have, and have a lot of money to do stuff. So with that, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you all for coming today. It is totally thrilling to be here in LA. It's very hot. I have now walked and biked a good chunk of LA, and it is lovely. And like Richard said, I get to work a lot of Vision Zero. I'm just one part of a very large organization that is committed to Vision Zero. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about an awful lot of work that has been done in the last 3 years to get us to the point we're at, what we're sort of doing next, and some of the things we've learned along the way, because we definitely have, you know, our eyes have been open to an awful lot of things, and I am glad that we have years to change the way we're doing things and to improve on them as well. So almost all of you know Vision Zero. It's 0 fatalities by 2024 in San Francisco. That's a super ambitious goal. On average, 30 people will die in San Francisco every year using the streets, whether they're walking, biking, or driving a car, and 20 of those will be pedestrians on average. This year, we're actually, unfortunately, on track to have more than 20. So our work is cut out for us. And I know that LA has about 7 times the number of fatalities that we have, but you're also 7 times larger than we are. So I think our challenge is the same. And we've been thinking for years about how to approach it, but Vision Zero really gave us an impetus to move things into high gear and have a real population level conversation about traffic safety. And just like every other city who's adopted Vision Zero, we recognize that engineering is a key component to Vision Zero, but it needs to be supported through other initiatives, and those are, you know, we typically call them the 3 E's, and of course we've added another E and a P, so that's education, enforcement. Engineering is what James and I focus 90% of our day on, and then we'll talk about evaluation and policy. So not different than I'm sure the LA initiative has. And what are we doing? Here we go. So about 1.5 years ago, we started our first action strategy, which committed to exactly the things we thought we could accomplish in 2 years that moved us towards Vision Zero, right? So on the engineering side, what we've said is we're going to improve 13 miles of streets annually in order to get us to, over 10 years, 130 miles of improvements, and that really focuses on our high injury network, which I'll talk about in a second. And we've also really committed to improving the way we deliver projects. So there are so many challenges in the city bureaucracy to building a street, to improving it, and we're working diligently in order to untangle at least some of the red tape that comes with it. For our enforcement, their goals are focus on the 5 and targeted speed enforcement. So focus on the 5 for them is for them to focus on the top 5 primary collision factors that result in fatalities on the street or severe injuries. And that includes things like speeding and failing to yield at a stop sign or fail to yield at a traffic light. And the goal for them is to have 50% of their citations on those top 5 primary collision factors, and that's citywide, not just on the high injury network. Our education program really has moved from a nascent, non-existent program to a much larger effort, and in fact, I'm proud to say that we just put out our first radio ad that is going live to everyone in San Francisco. I heard it on NPR that is encouraging San Franciscans to understand Vision Zero and to think about speeding and its speeding kills. On our evaluation side, I'll talk a little bit more about TransBase and how it works, but that's really being led by our public health department, which is amazing. We have a public health department who's a strong partner in coordinating an awful lot of our Vision Zero work. And lastly, on the policy side, something that we are dedicated to in San Francisco is that our #1 policy goal at the legislators, or the state legislation, is for automated speed enforcement. So where we cannot have a cop on every corner and we need something to reduce speed. Washington, D.C. has speed enforcement and has had dramatic reduction in fatalities as a result. You know, we're working to change state law in order for us to be able to implement it here. And with anything we can get here, that means we can get in LA as well. So I just want to say that I'm here talking to this wonderful group about Vision Zero, and I have a group equally large who works on Vision Zero with me in San Francisco. And I stand on the shoulders of giants. It has been decades of work in San Francisco that has brought us to the moment that we can even have a conversation about ending traffic fatalities. And there is so much effort. We had a major streetscape project on a street called Cesar Chavez, which leads to 101 for us. There was a major road diet, lane reduction, and you can see we had a plaza improvement. The red light camera program sends tickets to people who run red lights. We have a burning bicycle program that makes it safe for people to bike all over the city. And we're working on putting pet countdown signals everywhere. Something I noticed here in LA is you have pet countdown signals everywhere here. So it's clear that there's a ton of people who are doing a ton of work, and it wasn't about Vision Zero before. It was that we all understood that traffic safety was our responsibility. But what's great about Vision Zero is it expands that and makes it something we can all talk about. Not just with our friends who are traffic engineers, but with people who are public health or people at the police department. You know, we've done a ton of work, but what was it like to work at San Francisco before we'd adopted Vision Zero? So often we'd wait for a collision before we'd go to the intersection to see what sort of engineering improvements were needed. And that's because we had really limited funding. So we'd wait for death, and then we'd go to that intersection and say, okay, well, what was deficient and what can we start improving right now? Our streetscape projects were driven not by actually pedestrian fatalities, but for other purposes. So our paving program was going out and paving streets, and we'd say, oh, we want to fix something too. But that was being led by how deficient the pavement was, not by whether there were pedestrian fatalities on that street or not. It was really hard for us to get data. So the police department had a ton of data, MTA had a ton of data, some of it was digital, some of it was not. We didn't really have a good picture of what we were doing and how we were doing it. I would say that for the traffic engineering tools we use, there wasn't a lot of understanding across the city about what we were doing and why we were doing it. And that was hard to share, and we were pretty quiet about what we were up to. And lastly, it was a low priority. So traffic safety was a lower priority than, for instance, transit. We have a ton of transit projects that cost billions of dollars, and when people got in line for transportation money, pedestrian safety was sort of on the list, but it was kind of near the bottom. I'm going to sort of talk about what we've changed, how we've changed it, and where we're going. So I'm going to start with these PED high injury corridors, which became our high injury network. I'm going to talk about a capital prioritization project that was led by these great women named Salita and Bridget. So I get to talk about their work, which is great. And then we move to actual engineering tools. So we actually evaluate every intersection and we implement projects. So I'm going to walk us through some of that today. So first I'm going to talk about TransBase. So TransBase is something I like to call our secret weapon in San Francisco, and it was not led by the San Francisco MTA. It was led by our Department of Public Health. So we're a city and a county. So our public health department is actually our city public health department. They run all our hospitals. They're concerned deeply about population health. So that means HIV, anti-smoking, anti-obesity, and for a small group within public health, they were also really concerned about the cost of traffic fatalities. And they have always been on the sort of bleeding edge of what that means. And so over time, they got a number of grants, including one from the CDC, to put together a database with over, I believe, 200 variables that talk about the things that might happen on the street or around the street that might lead to a traffic fatality. And they call that trans-based. And I believe there's an effort here to also put a trans-based type system together. But they did that sort of very quietly, and then it became this important tool for us in our transportation toolbox. And it's because they cleaned all our data for us prior to us looking at it. They made it easy for us to get data from the police department, from public health, including our health records, land use from the planning department, future development, in one place. And it's easy, you just query it and say, I want to know where seniors are getting hit on streets that are over 45 miles per hour in the last 3 years. And you can do that, it's online, it's publicly available for anybody, and it makes it easy for us to ask some really basic questions about the things that are happening on the streets. And so with that information, armed with that information, and I think the most important thing that we've done in the last 3 years was institutionalize a high injury network. And so this comes in a few variations, but the one we really talk about is the 125 miles that represent 12% of our fatalities or injuries in the city. And that's for cars, people who walk, and people who bike. And if we walked into a room 2 or 3 years ago, we would not have had a conversation about the high injury network. We would have said, oh, well, tell me about speeding, or tell me about the number of fatalities. But now the high injury network is a proxy for us. We can say, this is a high injury network street. And everyone understands implicitly that therefore this is a street that's not safe for people to be on, and that we need to fix it. And it moves the conversation a lot faster, and it makes it easy to talk about traffic safety. And you see, there's really no surprise, so this is San Francisco. We have our northeast corner, our most dense employment and our most dense residential areas are way overpopulated, and the streets are overrepresented as a high injury street. And then the remaining sort of outer streets are actually mostly our transit network, so our rapid transit network. So if you've been, you'll know that 19th Avenue carries the 28th, or this is 3rd Street and it carries our brand new light rail. So there's no surprise that there's a connection between transit ridership and pedestrian injuries. And so this is a collision profile. So Lita's laughing, this is her slide. So this is why, so this is an example of how we can use Transbase, right? So Transbase is not just a database that's static and we're like, oh, somebody go look in that thing. We ask ourselves questions about things that we know are true because we're transportation professionals, and we read New York's papers, and they said, look, left turns at signalized intersections are disproportionately lead to injuries and fatalities. So we're like, okay, well, where do we have a problem with left turns at signalized intersections? And we did that for a bunch of places. But how Transbase is useful is you see that we have a collision involving left turns, which you'll know, oh yeah, come on in. Welcome. So we had a collision involving a left turn, right? And that's something we got from a police report, which was probably written on paper at some point, and then eventually translated into Transbase. And we also have the signalized intersection, and that's data that's held at the MTA, which is our DOT. So we're like, well, where is that a problem in our network? And all of a sudden we have a heat map, and I don't know if you can see the sort of differentiation based on this sort of slide, but you can tell in locations where we actually have banned left turns, so on 19th Avenue, we don't have left turn collisions at signalized intersections, which is great, because it means people aren't turning in a place we have a prohibition. And we do actually have a few problems on some of the east-west streets in the Tenderloin. And that lends itself to us talking about solutions. What are some solutions we might use to address a left turn collision at a signalized intersection? We might want to consider prohibiting turns. We might want to consider protecting the left turn movement by creating a pocket and adding a left turn signal. What are some other ones? A leading pedestrian interval, of course. Those are pretty useful. So we took all that information and we had to create an actual plan for doing all these things on the streets, in addition to all the things we were sort of already doing. So either adjusting the way we're doing things, continuing them, or creating new programs. And my personal favorite is the Quick and Effective program. My director likes to talk about more, better, faster. We're not really sure what that means, so this is what it means to me. Quick and effective means we are now doing more countermeasures everywhere where they're needed on the high injury network. And so a universal treatment is something called a continental crosswalk. You might know it as a just high visibility crosswalk. So we are coding 125 miles of San Francisco with continental crosswalks. That's more. We've improved our standards about how we address some of the cheaper interventions. So we're continually looking at how we make decisions about what we put where and improving it. So actually James led the effort to do the new PED Head Start policy. So I know there are now what we call leading pedestrian intervals, or LPIs, in downtown. And we now have an institutionalized practice by which we are putting in LPIs at certain locations. And something we're trying to move towards is you ask yourself why you shouldn't put in an LPI instead of why you should put in an LPI. And we actually talked a little bit to New York to hear more about their standards for LPIs. So we're constantly changing things. We have a couple more in the mix, and we can talk about those later. And then we're doing faster implementation of our existing projects. So we have any number of major streetscape projects that we're trying to implement as soon as possible. But capital projects take a long time, and they can take sometimes 5 years between the moment we finish sort of saying we're going to legislate this project to the moment we can even get something in the ground to start construction. And that's a long gap for a street that we know has real concerns for injury. So we are actually doing everything that we can with paint and putting them down on the streets way in advance of the construction. Because the cost of doing that is cheap enough that it's okay that we might lose some of those benefits when the construction comes through. So we have projects, for instance, on actually 19th Avenue, Lombard, which leads you to the Golden Gate Bridge, and Poe Street, where we've just put down a ton of paint. If you come up now, you won't see any construction, but you will see improvements right away. So what does that look like? So some of our quick and effective toolbox includes those continental crosswalks I talked about, prohibiting turn movements, what we like to call temporary fold-outs or painted safety zones, and signage like stop signs or yield signs at the highest need locations. So here's an example of a painted safety zone on Market Street. So Market Street's a great example of a corridor we're going to have a project on in a decade, and we were like, we just are not going to wait. And we immediately put this huge khaki-colored painted safety zone in, and when that long-term capital project comes in, they'll make that concrete. So what does it mean that we have a streetscape project coming in now? So I wanted to talk a little bit about one intersection. This is 19th and Terraval. So this is a street where a rapid bus route means a light rail that runs on the street. So what are some of the issues? We have left turning vehicles. We have right turning vehicles. We have high pedestrian volumes, people getting on the train at this sidewalk level, and people on the sidewalk that's super crowded. And this comes from our police department. So every single collision that the police department gets to us, we are able to then sort of map and say, well, what are some of the patterns we're seeing? So no surprise, we're seeing left turns becoming a problem for people who are walking, and right turns. So what are our solutions? So first, we're going to change our signal timing. First, we were like, well, great, leading pedestrian interval would be a great choice right here. So we're putting that in. Now we're going to put in those painted safety zones to extend the curb so that we have more visibility between cars and people turning, and to some extent it sort of reduces that distance. We're going to ban left turns. So this is actually a co-benefit. Transit running on the street hates left turning vehicles. There's one guy in a car trying to make a left turn, and I have 100 people in a train waiting to get through the intersection. And so by prohibiting the left turn movement, I've not only made it safe for people walking, but I've actually improved transit speed. And we're also saying no right on red. So that helps with the right turn conflict with pedestrians. We have a permanent, as the project comes in, so this project will be built in the next 2 years, this is a Caltrans right-of-way. They will build large bus bulbs, so we have 60-foot buses running on the street. So these are large bus bulbs for people to get on and off the bus, and they also reduce the crossing distance for pedestrians. And up at the top, we're actually going to put in a much better boarding island for people who are getting on and off the train. So here we have, at this point, and then continental crosswalks. So there's a layered approach. If you go to this intersection right now, you'll see a lot of these improvements in the ground. And as soon as that concrete comes in, we're going to constantly evaluate this intersection to make sure that the things we're doing worked. So I think I was asked to talk a little bit about how we prioritize what we do. So we also have a limited amount of money, and we can spend all our time on quick and effective and never be done. or we could spend all of our time on large capital projects and get really great streets in very few places. And so instead we need a sort of measured approach by which we take on all of those things and do it to the best of our ability and get a nice balance. And so our balances look like about 4 buckets of things. So the first top corner is a really neat synergy between a long-term transit project where San Francisco is trying to make our buses move faster. And so they're coming in and doing all sorts of small interventions all over the city. And we've been able to hook onto their work and improve the streets with them. And so we actually have 6 projects going on right now with what we call Muni Forward, or the rapid network for our transit agency. One that you could go and see right now is actually the Intermission, which is Mission Street in the heart of the city. And we reduced it from 4 lanes to 3. And that's making buses run faster because the buses didn't even have enough space in their lanes prior to our road diet. Now they have plenty of space. You're not moving around double parked cars. They say there's up to 3 to 10 minutes of transit reliability improvements in this corridor. And at the same time, I have 1 less lane of cars that people need to worry about as they're crossing the street. So that was pretty great that we have that happening. And I know that there's a lot that Metro is doing. There's a lot of opportunities to coordinate with them to make improvements where we know people are going to be because they're taking transit. We also have the Quick and Effective program I alluded to. So we're working at the intersections where we just see high volumes of people being hit all the time. And we're also doing corridor approaches, right? Because we want to talk about speed and speed reduction. So we recently implemented a road diet on Golden Gate Avenue, and that includes a bike lane for 7 blocks. So we removed a travel lane. We're actually going to try to do it on its couplet. So there's another street that runs west, and Golden Gate runs east. And we are okay with removing those lanes. Those streets are actually over capacity right now for traffic. And so putting a bike lane down is an immediate way to take a lane and to reduce speed. And it just takes a little bit of paint and a lot of political will. And we also have really big complete streets efforts. So we recognize that a street needs to be safe for everybody who's using it. If you're a pedestrian, if you're a cyclist, even if you're a car, the street needs to be designed in a gracious way. And those are expensive and hard, and we're still taking those on. And some of our complete streets efforts, I actually did not list 3 that are moving through a construction phase right now, which include Polk, Masonic, and Second. So those were really started 5 to 10 years ago and are now hitting construction now. But we have projects now in planning efforts because we recognize we need to have a continuous supply of those in order to make every street safe for everybody. And lastly, there's a lot of just intersection improvements we could be making. And that's just simple bulb outs, putting in traffic signals where there are crashes happening. So we have 11 new signals that we focused on the Heimdree corridor when we were prioritizing last year. And those move fairly fast in our world. And all those painted safety zones that are currently just the safe hit posts, those little white posts, and paint, we have to go back and put them in permanently. Like, they can't live as paint forever, and for those that are the highest need, we have no problem taking the time to actually design and build them. So what has changed? And this is like very opinionated, so hopefully there will be other opinions that you'll be able to hear. I feel like what Vision Zero gave us was we are now proactively improving streets for safety. You know, we're not waiting for a paving project. We're going to identify the places where the street needs to be improved and then asking the paving program to join us. And that we're doing this layered approach, right? That I do something short-term and now, and I come back and do something big and expensive and permanent later. Our recommendations are defensible. You know, we're not just out there saying, well, we hope more people walk if we do this. We're going to say, there are people and they're dying here, and that is why we have prioritized this street, this project. This is actually my favorite, this 3rd bullet. It's our focused interventions in our highest need location. So I don't know whether this is here, but we have a perception of you break it, you bought it. So whoever gets to the intersection and says, oh, we need to upgrade signal, or oh, we need to put in a curb ramp, you get to pay for everybody else's mistakes while you're at it. So you have to go in and say, oh, nobody's touched this intersection in 50 years, so here's all the things that are deficient. And then you ended up, whether you're Public Works or MTA or the signal program or whatever, you're gonna have to take on a huge burden. And as a result, we didn't take on the most expensive projects because they were gonna be so expensive. And so it became a cycle of deficiency in certain locations, specifically the Tenderloin, where we have some of our most at-risk and vulnerable communities. And now, and Bridget alluded to it, we got a bond, and what that meant to me was you need to go to those really difficult places and fix those. And you need to upgrade everything there, because right now everything is out of standard, and this is your opportunity to fix it. So I'm hoping that that really starts changing things, that we're not just avoiding difficult places because they're difficult. We now can share information, so I can actually get real-time useful information from the police and think about it in terms of trends when we have it all in Transpace. And our police department has really stepped up and is starting to talk about how they can get us better data, because I think they also understand why we need it now. We've had a much broader coalition for safety improvements from our public. So we before had a group that was interested in pedestrian walkability and safety, and our bicycle coalition. And they created a Vision Zero coalition, and that was so much broader than just walking or biking. It's from neighborhood activists, so community groups who are just focused on their neighborhood. We've had seniors and people with disabilities who are activists joining this coalition as well. And so we just have a much broader tent of people who support the work we're doing, which is really important for us to actually do anything and to have, good perceptions of the work we're doing, that we're doing it for the right reasons. And something that I've recently noticed is we have a change in media attitudes towards traffic deaths. So prior, I don't know if the media cared one way or the other, whether they would report a death. And now we don't have a death on a city street that isn't on the front page of the SF Chronicles website. And so I know about a death because it's in the newspaper, which is important to me because it means everyone else is aware of that too. And I lastly recently heard our traffic reporter on NPR has stopped using the word accident to refer to a collision or a crash that's on the street that's causing some sort of delay, And so all of a sudden, me and Joe McDonald are totally in good shape because here he is using the same words that I'm using. And that's a small tweak, but it's pretty neat that he's made that change himself. And I'm going to write him a letter telling him that I appreciate that. But we are not satisfied. I mean, like I said, we are not doing enough. We are still seeing a rise in fatalities. And actually, last year we saw a reduction in overall injuries. But our goal is not reduced injuries. Our goal is 0 deaths. So as long as we see a rise, we're clearly not doing enough, and we need to do more. And so some of the things I've been thinking about that we could be pivoting and improving on as we sort of take on another year of Vision Zero is we need to start talking about complete streets that aren't just about pedestrian safety. Bike facilities are a great way to take travel lanes, but they're also just make the street more, from a feeling perspective, they feel better. They feel like a good street to be on for everyone involved. And that's the gold standard for a street I personally want to build. I want to build a street that's good for everybody on it. And I think that we can spend more time finding places where the bike network is deficient and the pedestrian safety record is not great, and focus on those streets together so that we're building a complete street and that the message is the same. I'm not sure we did a great job there are 30,000 employees in the city and county of San Francisco. So that's like 8% of the population of San Francisco. And those are people who have to listen when someone shows up to their staff meeting. So we have an immediate in. The door is always open to any other city agency because they're part of our city family. And I think it's really important for city employees to be ambassadors of, this safety initiative. And the more we can reach other city employees and talk to them about our work, the stronger our work gets. Something I've noticed is, in San Francisco, we have a, no plastic bottles in public meetings rule, which was sort of started by the San Francisco Environment Agency. And they came around, they gave us a presentation and said, no, you can't use plastic bottles anymore. And sure enough, I really don't see them any longer. And everyone got in line because they were powerful and they did the right in-reach to every city agency. And I think that we could do the same about Vision Zero. This is something I'm struggling with, is when I'm a planner and I start projects and I say, great, I would like to do a complete street project on Taylor Street. And probably what I need to do is also call the folks at Public Health who are doing some of our education work or our coalition, who is doing an awful lot of on-the-ground activism, and the police department to let them know I'm doing a big project, because otherwise I'm not, I haven't built the goal of Vision Zero, which is to be bigger than my own E, which is to do systemic safety. And that's going to be a big pivot for me personally, and so I can only imagine that that's going to be a big pivot for all of our project managers. So I'm still looking for the best way that that happens. And lastly, and this is our biggest one, and I left this bullet for last because this is James's favorite topic of conversation, is we need to begin a public conversation about speed and speeding that isn't related to congestion. And the reason is because sometimes people say, but I'm not moving. Look, the cars aren't going anywhere. We're all stuck in congestion. But that doesn't mean there aren't opportunities to speed even when you're stuck in congestion. If you're at the front of a queue and you get a green, you can get pretty high speed going up to another lane. Or, there's plenty of off-peak hours where people are speeding on the same streets that are fully congested at rush hour. And we are struggling because people are really feeling the impacts of economic development in San Francisco. And so a lot of our streets really are very congested. And when we're talking about the projects we're talking about removing some pretty basic things like travel lanes. And that really hurts. And I think we need to find a balance by which we talk about what does it mean to have a longer commute in order to improve safety? And how much longer is that commute? And what does it mean to build facilities for people who aren't currently there, but we're hoping we will get them there by building a safe network? And I think that's really broad and that's like national, and so I'm really looking for all of your support to help that. And I think this is the end of my presentation. So I was really hoping we could get some questions or even comments or conversations going. And thank you so much. Don't be shy. Yeah.
What's the the mode breakdown of the people who are killed? Like what percentage are people walking? What percentage are people?
Yeah, it's like 60% people walking. I believe about 20%. And the remainder is 20% motorcycles. I'm sorry. So we have a real issue with motorcycles. I think that's national.
Yeah, we only have maybe 1 or 2 people killed in a motor vehicle every year. That's pretty small.
But motorcyclists are super disproportionate given up that they have like 2 or 3% mode share because they are 20%, and then the balance is cyclists. We had 2 cyclist deaths on one day this year. It was terrible.
What do you ascribe the increase in fatalities to?
What do we ascribe the increase in fatalities to?
Because we have the same issue here. We've had, in fact, a 50% increase in driver-driver fatalities this year. And part of it is, whenever the economy gets better and gas prices are cheap, people drive more, vehicle miles traveled increases, and typically that's a very powerful predictor for how many crashes we're going to see. But what we're seeing here feels like it's outstripping what you would normally expect from that increase. I don't know if you guys have given any thought to why you feel like you're seeing a similar pattern there, or if the pattern is out of whack with what you might expect from a normal population.
Yeah, I think, so one of our sort of backouts to that question is we talk a lot about injuries along with fatalities, right? Because a fatality is something that should have been an injury, but the person who was hit was either hit at a higher speed and they were a senior or a child or someone with a disability. So the collision could have happened with someone like me, and I would have been okay, probably, but instead it happened with a vulnerable person, and instead they died. And so we've actually seen that 15% reduction in severe injuries and fatalities. So it's hard to take a fatality trend and attach it year over year. We're excited about that 15% decrease because it was in injuries.
But you're saying you're on past it. You're on a path to exceed.
I think the fatalities are somewhat random, and that is why I try to stick to injuries and fatalities together, because otherwise I'm just going to end up haphazarding a guess, and I have no idea. But
yeah, it's a challenge. For us, we only have about 30 fatalities a year, so using that to track trends is challenging. We have about 900 severe injuries a year. That's a more sizable number than we